get the police on their way out there, okay? How old is your daughter? She's 6. Have you checked all the units? I've just gotten up. Okay, what's your name? Kristi, I'm her mum. Okay, Kristi, what's your last name? Abrahams. What's your daughter's name? Kiesha. What is it? Kiesha. Spell it. K-I-E.
In the quiet suburbs of Sydney, a mother reported her 6-year-old daughter missing. What seemed like a tragic disappearance soon became one of the most chilling child murder cases in Australian history. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because stories like this remind us how easily innocence can be lost. Kristi Abrahams called putrid dog and told to rot in hell as she was, sentenced to 16 years for murder of vulnerable and defenseless Kiesha by Amy Dale. The Daily Telegraph, July 18, 2013. Kristi Ann Abrahams lived a troubled life beyond most people's understanding, the judge who sentenced her today for murdering her defenseless 6-year-old daughter said. But the police officers who investigated her daughter Kiesha's death and the community left behind to mourn her death are left reeling from a murder few can comprehend. Abrahams was described by Justice Ian Harrison as an inevitable product of entrenched intergenerational failures. In sentencing her to a total minimum sentence of 16 years for murder and interfering with a corpse, he said, the offender's failings are mirrored in the failings of others. As anyone knows, the burdensome responsibilities of parenthood are not bestowed only on those who are capable of meeting them, Justice Harrison said. Abrahams was patently ill-equipped for the role and probably equally unable to recognize. The death of Kiesha was in these circumstances a foreseeable and preventable consequence of foreseeable and preventable causes, but the sentence, comparatively light compared to other punishments handed down to mothers who murder, was met with anger by a packed Supreme Court gallery. Those.
Perhaps, Robert, do you want to speak on behalf of Kristi?
What would you like to say, mate?
If there's anyone out there that knows or seen anything, just come forward, contact the police.
Who trusted Abrahams hissed rot in hell and labeled her a putrid dog. As the emotionless 30-year-old was led away, the offender has been publicly vilified, Justice Harrison said, adding that of the gamut of emotions felt by a community when a child is dead, guilt is paramount. The only time in Abraham's journey through the courts, which began with her arrest in April 2011, showed any feeling to the evidence was when submissions turned to her own childhood. The court heard Abrahams, who found her mother dead at age 10, endured an early life of abuse and neglect, which was compounded by an intellectual disability. But the same man she blamed for an early life of pain, her father, was the same person she wanted to place Kiesha with when she admitted she couldn't handle this kid anymore. Russell Oxford, the senior police officer who led the investigation into Kiesha's death, said the outcome should lead all parents to reflect, then go home and hug their kids. Justice Harrison of the sentence, just before telling Abrahams to stand and learn her fate. Retribution and mercy are important in equal measure. As Abrahams turned her head to be led away by prison officers, many in the gallery thought mercy is what Kiesha was, granted least of all, the sentencing. Today comes close to 3 years to the day since Kiesha's tragic life of abuse ended in her Empt Druitt home. Abrahams was hit with a sentence of 21 years and 6 months. She was also sentenced to 18 months for interfering with a corpse. With the two penalties combined, Justice Ian Harrison sentenced her to a minimum 16-year term. With time already served, she will be eligible for parole in 2027. Justice Harrison said, while he couldn't be satisfied Abrahams intended to kill 6-year-old Kiesha, or that she was responsible for sustained abuse of her daughter, she meant to seriously injure her. How Kiesha died is not known to me, and I have been unable to provide a satisfactory version to replace it, he said. He said the murder of a vulnerable and defenseless child in her care was in the mid-range of seriousness and believed she is unlikely to re-offend Allison Anderson and other former friends of Abrahams told her to rot in hell after the sentence. The Barn Court heard Abrahams as Kiesha's mother had the highest duty of care to her and significantly breached that by delivering no more than 2 blows to a 6-year-old child. Abrahams was entitled to a 10% reduction for pleading guilty on the morning her lengthy trial was to start. The court was told the version given by 30-year-old Abrahams upon her guilty plea that she gave Kiesha a little nudge after a struggle to put pajamas on was not accepted by the Crown and not consistent with the medical evidence. Kiesha's post-mortem revealed serious physical abuse, with the court told the damage escalated in a seriousness, particularly in the last 18 months of her life. The damage to Kiesha's remains, which were set alight at her burial, means the exact cause of death will never be known. Robert Smith, Abraham's partner and the man who buried Kiesha at the Shalvey Bush site, pleaded guilty to manslaughter in December 2011 and was sentenced to at least 12 years in jail. Justice Harrison said there was a 25-year standard non-parole period for the murder of a child, but indicated other factors could be taken into account when determining the sentence. He said she had been publicly vilified during the time the case has been before the court. The Supreme Court was packed with former friends, police and family, including a group who yelled out at Abrahams to go to hell as the prison truck was driven into the King Saint complex just before 9 a.m. Abrahams pleaded guilty to manslaughter in May this year, but it was rejected by prosecutors, forcing her to proceed to trial. On June 17th, the morning a jury was due to be picked and the trial to start, Abrahams pleaded guilty to murder. The case Kiesha became a familiar face in newspapers and on television after she was reported missing by Abrahams and her partner Robert Smith in August 2010. Abrahams told police and reporters she had put the little girl to bed in their Hebersham home about 9:30 p.m., but she was gone by the following morning. But even from early days, homicide detectives believed there was a different, more disturbing truth behind the disappearance. It took several months, but one night shortly before her arrest in April 2011, Abrahams tearfully told an undercover officer the chilling story of Kiesha's final hours and the steps she and Smith had taken to conceal the crime, rather than being sent to sleep after a family evening watching movies. As Abrahams initially told police, Kiesha was hurt by her mother on her bedroom floor after she resisted putting on her pajamas. Abrahams admitted her daughter felt like jelly and appeared unresponsive when placed in the shower. By the next morning, she was dead, a dental expert told the court last month. Kiesha had damage akin to an adult sporting injury, a contradiction to Abraham's claim she had nudged her daughter with her foot. Kiesha's small body would stay in a suitcase for days before Abrahams and Smith would take an evening taxi ride to Shalvey, walk into bushland, and discard her remains. Abrahams told the undercover officer she was scared of walking and seeing Kiesha's body set alight. The pair were arrested 8 months after reporting Kiesha missing. While visiting the gravesite to mark what would have been her 7th birthday, Smith pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was earlier this year sentenced to at least 12 years in jail. Cycle of abuse. The court heard Abrahams' failings as a mother could be traced back to her own childhood suffering. Kristi Abrahams is very much a product of what happened to her. Her barrister Janet Manuel SC told the court last month, "It's very confronting for a community to accept the death of a child at the hands of her mother, but Kristi didn't receive the care she needed, and that was a failure of the system." The court heard Abrahams was the child of a violent and alcoholic man who has spent large periods of his life in custody. At age 10, she discovered her mother dead in their home and began years in and out of foster care. She was never given love and support, which was important to her own development, Ms. Manuel said. While prosecutor Christopher Maxwell QC said Abrahams's childhood amplifies the tragedy of the case, he added the anger she clearly felt towards Kiesha needs to be considered on sentencing. Documents before the Supreme Court say Abrahams made threats to hurt Kiesha before the murder, expressing frustration at her toilet training and playing up at school. "I really will hurt her. I will kill her," Abrahams is reported as saying. "I can't handle this kid anymore." Kiesha had been removed from her mother's care previously. After requiring hospital treatment for a bite wound in 2005, Abrahams pleaded guilty to the assault in court and was forced to complete an anger management course before Kiesha was returned to her in December 2006. Kiesha's life of pain, many people saw the signs Kiesha was in trouble, but their concerns weren't enough to save her from a violent mother. The little girl went to kindergarten only 4 times, and attempts by education workers to amend this were met with Abrahams locking and refusing to answer the door when they visited the home. A Doc's caseworker, who spoke to Kiesha away from her mother in 2007, pointed to a burn mark, to which the then 3-year-old said, "Mum did that, and Mum hit there." Court documents said Abrahams was annoyed by Kiesha's resemblance to her biological father, her ex-partner Kristi Weippeart, and that it triggered the abuse. Other neighbors and family friends reported seeing Kiesha flinch, even if Abrahams just raised her hand to speak casually, and that she appeared fearful of her mother. Kristi Abrahams jailed for at least 16 years for murder of 6YO daughter Kiesha Weippeart by court reporter Jamel Wells, abc.net.au, July 19th. Tui Thrine Sydney, woman who murdered her 6-year-old daughter after years of physically abusing the child, will spend up to 22.5 years in prison. Kristi Abrahams pleaded guilty to murdering her daughter, Kiesha, whose remains were found in bushland in Sydney's West in early 2011, 8 months after she was reported missing. There were angry scenes outside the state's Supreme Court as the prison van carrying Abrahams arrived this morning. Inside, the courtroom was packed as Justice Ian Harrison handed down his sentence, but Abrahams sat with her back to the public gallery. Abrahams showed no emotion as she was sentenced to a non-parole period of 16 years for murder and interfering with a corpse. "Rot in hell," someone in the public gallery yelled out as she was led away. The judge told the court the crime ranked in the mid-range of seriousness because it was an impulsive and uncontrolled act of violence. He said Abrahams has shown remorse and is unlikely to reoffend, and that her intellectual disability and own experience of being abused as a child contributed to her crime. The court heard Abrahams was subjected to anti-Aboriginal comments as a child and had witnessed domestic violence in her childhood home. The judge said Abrahams was put in a foster home as a 10-year-old. After her mother died, Kiesha suffered abuse throughout her life, but Justice Harrison also said Kiesha deserved to be protected and had done nothing wrong. He said the body was kept in a suitcase for 3 days before it was disposed of. The judge told the court there was evidence that Kiesha suffered physical abuse throughout her life, but it could not be proven that all the injuries were inflicted by Abrahams. He said in the last 18 months of Kiesha's life, the frequency of the injuries had increased. The judge said the DNA profile of Kiesha's blood was found around her mother's unit. Her partner, Robert Smith, has already been jailed for at least 12 years over his role in the child's death. Abrahams told police that, after she nudged her daughter with her foot to get the crying child to put on her pajamas, Kiesha hit her head. She said her daughter was like jelly. When she put her to bed and was not breathing the next morning, Abrahams did not seek medical help for her daughter and agreed facts previously released by the court state that she and Smith put the child's body in a suitcase, then buried her in bushland at Shelvay. Ms. Abrahams and Smith attempted to destroy all evidence that they thought could implicate them in the deceased's death, including removing evidence from the unit and throwing away their clothes, shoes, and mobile phone SIM cards, the court papers said. According to the agreed facts, Smith burned the deceased's body prior to burial, burned the suitcase they had used to transport the body, and threw away the hammer he used to dig the grave. The papers say Abrahams was present for the disposal of her daughter's body. An autopsy revealed Kiesha had teeth fractures delivered, with force and 10 separate injuries to her head, jaw, and body. The Department of Community Services, DOCS, which is now called the Department of Family and Community Services, put Kiesha into foster care after Abrahams bit her on the shoulder at the age of 15 months. But the child was given back to Abrahams, who had anger management counseling. When she was 3, Kiesha told a DOCS worker her mother had burned her with a cigarette. DOCS received various reports of injuries to Kiesha from neighbors and family. Members' education officials went to Abrahams' home several times because Kiesha only attended school 4 times in her life. School teachers and other witnesses had reported bruises on her face and head. Today, Justice Harrison said Abrahams' anger and resentment about her own childhood affected her parenting. He said she will get psychiatric care and support and education in jail. Anger as forensic pathologist details injuries suffered by Kiesha Weippeart in Supreme Court testimony by Amy Dale. The Daily Telegraph, June 25, 2013. Kiesha Weippeart told a caseworker, "Mum did that, after being asked about a cigarette burn. Court documents have revealed. The Supreme Court heard today that Kiesha suffered weeks and months of physical abuse before her death, with her post-mortem showing significant and considerable damage to her head, face, and shoulders. Abrahams resented and abused her daughter because of the physical resemblance she had to her biological father. The court heard. Kiesha was interviewed, alone by a doc's caseworker, after going to Nepean Hospital in 2007 with a bruise on her face. She was wearing a hat and kept turning her face away from the caseworker. Documents say the deceased was not able to account for the bruise on her face, but in relation to the cigarette burn, she said, "Mum hit there and Mum did that." The court has also been told that Kiesha, a kindergarten student, only attended school 4 times. Earlier, Dr. Matthew Ord, the forensic pathologist who completed a 14-page postmortem on Kiesha's body, told the Supreme Court some of the injuries appear to be a physical blow. If you like, Kiesha's mother, Kristi Abrahams, 30, is awaiting sentence after last week pleading guilty to murdering the 6-year-old at their Mount Druitt home in July 2010. The graphic descriptions of the litany of injuries suffered by the little girl led some in the public gallery to call out, "I didn't even know her and I loved her more than you," as the hearing was adjourned. Another person told Abrahams she was a low-life dog. Her sentencing hearing was told yesterday that Kiesha's teeth reveal she received as many as 5 blows to the jaw before she died, which experts say is at odds with Abraham's claim that she nudged the little girl with her foot and caused her to hit her head on a bed. Dr. Ord, who finished the postmortem more than 4 months after Kiesha's remains were found in a shallow grave in Chevet in April 2011, has detailed the severe injuries her body suffered. He told the court he agreed the injuries were consistent with physical abuse and said if she had been conscious at the time they were suffered, they would have resulted in significant pain. These are markers of severe impact to the body, Dr. Ord said. Kiesha's bones show new formation and thickening, a trait of healing injuries, Dr. Ord said. The court heard damage to her lower jaw showed localized, severe blunt force, trauma to this area of the body. Some of those injuries were sustained weeks or months before Kiesha died. Dr. Ord found. The hearing continues before Justice Ian Harrison. Kristi Abrahams Supreme Court. Sentencing hearing for Kiesha Weippeart murder continues. The Daily Telegraph, June 25, 2013, before Kiesha Weippeart was murdered. Her mother, Kristi Abrahams, had warned a relative that she was sick of her daughter and would hurt her or kill her. A court heard yesterday. As the Supreme Court yesterday began considering what jail sentence Abrahams should receive, harrowing details of Kiesha's final days have emerged, including the opinion of a dental expert, who said the 6-year-old suffered as many as 5 fresh blows to the jaw before her death. The court heard the injuries Kiesha suffered were equivalent to a sporting injury, and that, on her last night alive, she had argued with her mother about putting on her pajamas. Abrahams told her father she would hurt her or kill Kiesha because she was sick of her shitting and pissing in bed and vaping up at school. The court heard. On the morning her trial was due to start last week, Abrahams, 30, pleaded guilty to murdering Kiesha on or about July 18, 2010, at their empty Druitt home. Crown Prosecutor Christopher Maxwell QC said, while Abrahams had told police, after reporting Kiesha missing, that the little girl had grown up in a happy family environment where she was well cared for and loved, evidence at the sentencing hearing would tell a different story. He said the comments Abrahams made to her father were relatively contemporaneous to the murder. Abrahams spent 8 months denying any involvement in her daughter's disappearance before the girl's remains were found in bushland at Chalvet in April 2011. The court was told Abrahams claimed to police she only nudged Kiesha with her foot while her daughter was lying on her bedroom floor not wanting to put on her pajamas on July 18, 2010. She said Kiesha then jumped and hit her head on the bed. Abrahams said she put Kiesha in the shower, noting she felt like jelly, but was still breathing. She and de facto partner Robert Smith, who has already been sentenced for manslaughter, found the little girl unresponsive the next day. Mr. Smith set the little girl's remains alight and buried her in a shallow grave. Abrahams didn't call police to report her missing for almost 2 weeks. Dental expert Dr. Alam Middleton told the court he was hesitant to go lower than saying there were 3 blows to Kiesha's jaw, saying he believed it was more like 4 or 5. Dr. Middleton told the court Kiesha's teeth revealed fresh damage to the jaw, a sign of a very significant trauma. The court heard the impact on the teeth was abnormal and unusual, as the recipient of the impact could not have had any idea the hit was happening. The hearing continues. A life filled with abuse. Kiesha murder by Isabel Hayes. Stuff.code ends June 17, 2013. The abuse started years before Kiesha was murdered by her mother. The little girl was just 15 months old when Kristi Abrahams viciously bit her daughter's shoulder. 5 years later, when Kiesha was reported missing by a seemingly distraught Abrahams and her partner Robert Smith, they described the little girl as always happy, bubbly, but that shoulder bite was only the first known incident in a short life filled with severe physical abuse as the couple fronted the media near their Mt. Druitt home on August 3, 2010. To beg for help in finding Kiesha, Abrahams keened repeatedly, managing only to describe her 6-year-old daughter as beautiful. "If anyone has seen her, can they please contact police?" she said, as she clutched a tissue to her nose and mouth. By then, Kiesha had been dead for 3 weeks. Abrahams had knocked her unconscious on July 13th before she and Smith put her to bed. After Kiesha died, the pair stuffed her body in a suitcase and kept it in her bedroom for the next 5 days. They then donned disguises, took a taxi to nearby bushland in Shalvey, burned the child's body, and buried it in a shallow grave. The Supreme Court would later hear that Kiesha had suffered fracturing to her teeth, consistent with a contact sport blow or jumping from a height and landing heavily on the ground. She had several injuries suggesting repeated assaults over the weeks and months before her death. Injuries found only in the remains of children who suffered severe physical abuse. From the start, police had their suspicions. Abrahams had been convicted of assault occasioning bodily harm after she bit Kiesha, and the child was removed from her care for 18 months. Abrahams was ordered to enter into a parental care plan, attend an anger management course, and get counseling before Kiesha was returned to her in December 2006. Before they reported Kiesha as missing, the couple went to elaborate lengths to pretend she was alive and well. On July 28, 2010, Abrahams went shopping for some toys for Kiesha, including a Tinkerbell poster. They told police they watched the movie The Golden Compass on the evening of Saturday, July 31st, before Abrahams tucked Kiesha into bed in her pink pajamas and a purple pumpkin patch jacket. They then claimed they woke up the next morning to find the front door ajar and Kiesha missing, but the pair couldn't hide the fact that no one else had seen Kiesha alive since at least July 7th, when her grandmother had seen her. That's the puzzling part for us. The lack of sightings of the young child. Officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Inspector Russell Oxford, told reporters at the time. Eventually, Smith cracked and confessed to an undercover cop. Smith and Abrahams were later arrested at Kiesha's makeshift grave in April 2011, 8 months after reporting her missing, on what would have been her 7th birthday. Smith, who claimed he was physically abused by Abrahams, pleaded guilty to manslaughter and to being an accessory after murder. He was jailed for at least 12 years last month by Justice Megan Latham, who found he made the simple and cowardly decision to do nothing when Abrahams assaulted the little girl before taking a lead role in getting rid of her body. Leisha found last month. Abrahams, 30, admitted to Kiesha's manslaughter, but this plea was rejected by the Crown, which was determined to try her for murder. She also lost a bid to be tried by judge alone on the basis there had been extensive pre-trial publicity that might prejudice a jury. Now, nearly 3 years after Kiesha died, the lies are over, and Abrahams has finally taken responsibility for ending a tiny life that was all too brutish and short. Kiesha Weippeart's stepfather, Robert Smith, jailed by Peter Bodkin. The Daily Telegraph, March 3, 2013. The man who left Kiesha Weippeart to die, then hid her body in a shallow grave, will spend at least 12 years behind bars. Kiesha's stepfather, Robert Smith, was this afternoon sentenced in the Supreme Court over the 6-year-old's 2010 death. The young girl was reported missing from her family's Met Druitt home in August, but her remains were not found until April the following year. In a secretly recorded conversation with undercover police, Smith said he heard a loud bang from the girl's bedroom more than 2 weeks before she was reported as having disappeared. He found Kiesha lying on the floor unconscious and tried to wake her, but instead of calling an ambulance, he went to bed then to work the following day. When Smith returned home, he found the girl dead. Kiesha's body was hidden in a suitcase for several days before he took it in a taxi to nearby Shalvey, where it was doused in petrol and set alight before the remains were buried. About 2 weeks later, emergency services received a 000 call reporting the girl missing from her bedroom after the front door of the unit was left open. For the next 8 months, Smith maintained the young girl has disappeared, with the 33-year-old even telling police he had been like a father to Kiesha. "She's not my daughter, but I treat her like she was," he said. In April 2011, Smith finally admitted to undercover officers that Kiesha was dead and he had hidden her body. "She wasn't waking up or nothing. I was like, how can this shit happen to me?" he said. Smith was eventually charged with the girl's murder, but he later pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of gross criminal negligence. He also admitted to being an accessory to her murder. Justice Megan Latham today sentenced Smith to a maximum 16 years in jail with a 12-year non-parole period. She said his crimes were among the most serious imaginable of their type, with his decision to burn the young girl's body a particularly heinous act, Justice Latham said. Smith made a simple and cowardly choice to protect his own interests, rather than those of a vulnerable and gravely injured child. These were not spontaneous, ill-conceived acts carried out in panic, such as are usually encountered by the courts when dealing with this offense, she said, Justice Latham said finding an unconscious 6-year-old would move anyone except the most callous and unfeeling of adults to seek medical help, with time already served. Smith will be eligible for release in 2023. A woman, who can't be identified for legal reasons, is expected to face trial for Kiesha's murder later this year. Kiesha Weippeart's body set alight and buried, after death, by Amy Dale. The Daily Telegraph, February 15th. 2013 Kiesha Weippeart's body was placed in a suitcase and taken to a shallow grave after her stepfather scouted for burial locations. A court has heard today. Robert Smith is still awaiting sentence for the little girl's manslaughter, after pleading guilty to his part in her death in December 2011. The Supreme Court heard today that his guilty plea to manslaughter is based on gross negligence and a breach of duty of care to the little girl who died in July 2010. Her remains were found in bushland in Shalvey in April 2011, after she was reported missing from her home. Details about the little girl's death have been revealed in court. Justice Megan Latham was told that Smith had known the 6-year-old was not well, but had left for work. When he returned, efforts to revive her in her bedroom were unsuccessful, the court heard. Smith has agreed. He placed her body in a suitcase and left the luggage in her room for a few days, while he rode around Sydney's west on a bicycle looking for a burial spot. When he found one, he dug a hole, then caught a taxi with the suitcase from a different location. The court heard Kiesha's body was placed in the grave. Before she was doused in petrol and set alight, Smith was arrested in April 2011, near his stepdaughter's remains. Dressed in a white shirt and black pants, Smith listened intently to today's proceedings. The case has been adjourned for 2 weeks. Kiesha's stepdad burnt and buried her body. News.9msn.com.au February 15th. 2013 Hunt told police he treated his stepdaughter Kiesha Weippeart just like she's my own. But when the little girl was killed at home, Robert Smith burnt her body and buried it in a shallow bushland grave before pretending she had disappeared. Smith, 33, had ample opportunity to seek medical help for 6-year-old Kiesha, who was knocked unconscious by another person at her empty Druitt home in July 2010. The Supreme Court in Sydney heard on Friday. Instead, he saw her condition deteriorate and did nothing about it, court documents said. Crown Prosecutor Keith Alder said Smith went to work the day after Kiesha was injured, leaving her in a comatose state and returning home that night to find her dead. He knew Kiesha had been knocked out Mr. Alder told Smith's sentence hearing. He knew he couldn't wake her. He had ample opportunity to get her medical assistance. Smith has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of the girl on the grounds of negligence and to being an accessory after the fact of murder. Another person, who cannot be named for legal reasons, will stand trial for Kiesha's murder later this year. According to an agreed statement of facts tendered in court, Smith told police he heard a loud bang from Kiesha's bedroom and discovered she had been knocked out. I must have the worst luck, and I was like, I didn't do anything, but I'm there, I'm in the picture, I'm part of it, Mr. Smith later told an undercover police officer. After Kiesha died, the court heard Smith stuffed her body into a suitcase and left it in her room for about 5 days before he and his co-accused took it to a pre-prepared grave at nearby Shalvey on July 18, 2010, Smith then doused the deceased's body in petrol and set the deceased's body alight